Welcome. We're on the red couch with Philip Heylen, Vice Mayor for Culture, Economy, City Maintenance, City Property, and Public Worship of Antwerp, Belgium. After 11 years and over $20 million in a planning and reconstruction process, the City of Antwerp opened the doors to Red Star Line Museum in the fall of 2013. 2.6 million people departed from Antwerp for New York and Philadelphia between 1872 and 1934 in the same three waterfront shipping warehouses that is now Red Star Line Museum, an extraordinary museum of migration. Philip, I am thrilled to have you on the red couch.
I'm very happy to see you again.
I am delighted. It's been a long time. It's been a whole year.
A year. A lot has happened in that year.
Okay, but before we get to what's happened, I want to know, what does someone in your position do?
Well, we have a system in Belgium where on the local level, the local authorities, cities, local communities, they elect directly, of course, the members of the city council. Mm-hmm. So all the members in the city council are elected in terms of 6 years. And then you form a kind of majority, city government, let's say. Mm-hmm. And then the members of the city council, they choose who is going to be in the government. You need to have a city government. I'm one of the 7 vice mayors of the city of Antwerp, so we run every 6 years. And this is my 3rd term that I've been re-elected, so I'm very happy to continue in doing this.
Congratulations! So you have this incredible new project. One of your more recent new projects was opening this Museum of Migration. So how did it come to be, and why did you feel it was so important? You really championed this project.
Well, it's a long story, but it's also a very personal story. My family emigrated to the United States. As far as I was concerned, in the 1950s. That's the part of the family that I went to visit in New York, in Connecticut, in South Carolina for the last 40 years. It was, however, in the year 2000 that I went to see my uncle again. At that time, he moved over to Florida, not far from where we are here in Sarasota. He moved to Winter Park. And it was a kind of a tradition that on the last evening, he would play the piano and sing some songs from Irving Berlin. And he'd been doing that for so many years. And that evening, that specific trip, when we left from Winter Park that evening, he mentioned Red Star Line, which he'd never done before. I must say, I never asked, how did you get? He said, by the boat, okay, in the 1950s. But that evening he said, well, we went on the boat, and he said, not the Red Star Line. I said, what do you mean with the Red Star Line? Because I knew the story of Red Star Line Antwerp, but never made the association with my family.
Right.
And then he said, well, the first part of our family moved over with the Red Star Line, coming from France. My mother's name is Dauphin, and they moved over with the Red Star Line in 1893.
Oh, wow.
My family that I've known, the Dauphins, which are still here in America, they became American citizens, moved over in the 1950s, but with a complete other shipping company, Cunard Lines. So there he mentioned Red Star Line. I said, what the hell, Red Star Line? We have these buildings in Antwerp, which they want to tear down and create nice condos on the waterfront and, you know, sell them for lots of millions. And that's how I got more and more involved, and that's when it really started running, and that I said, no, we're not going to, I have to save that. I was not the vice mayor at that moment. I was just a member of the city council. But that was the moment when I said, I need to get attention to create awareness and to make sure that this common story between Antwerp and New York, between my country, Belgium, and the United States, it has so much to be told. We should save this. And that's how, more than 11 years ago, it all started.
Wow. So, I had the privilege, my grandparents came through Red Star Line. I had the privilege of being there on the opening weekend with you. And it was an incredibly emotional time to be there and to witness how, to me, it's like a living museum. Mm-hmm. You took us on a tour. I would love for you to take our audience on a tour as if we were coming to the museum, and how you feel like you're one of the people that came through yourself.
But, you know, when we created the museum, the idea was it needed to be a personal story.
Right.
I always say, if people ask me, what is Red Star Line? Red Star Line are 3 words about 2 continents, millions of peoples, so that means millions of dreams, but at the end they all had one story, and that was to move from the old world, Europe in those days, and try to get a new life. It is something of every day. When we sit at home and we watch TV, it's very easy to have an opinion about migration, specifically in these days where you see so much images on TV. But migration has been going on, I call it people on the move, have been going on for more than tens of thousands of years.
Right.
And believe me, we're all sitting here very relaxed and we don't have stress. But there will be a time when we will be migrating to another planet or somewhere. Good for us, we don't have to think about that. There's almost too much stress today. But that's what it is, people on the move. Now, if that becomes a very personal story and you bring it in a personal way, then people might recognize something of it, you know. That's what we do with Red Star Line. We tell the story between 1872 and 1942 when people came to Antwerp to take a ship. This was a period with tremendous economical problems in Central and Eastern Europe, with pogroms against the Jews in what we would later call the Soviet Union, but in Russia of the Tsar. It was a period where there was shortage of food. Even in my country, in that period, people were starving because of all kinds of reasons. So people wanted to get away and wanted to have a new life. Antwerp, with the main port, located in the center of Europe, was exactly that place where people wanted to go to take a boat, to take a ship. It's also a place where, for many hundreds of years, Jewish families felt home. So the whole Jewish connection, let's say, coming from Central and Eastern Europe, the Ashkenazi, or the people coming from the south, from north of Africa, the Sephardic Jewish community, they all came to Antwerp, and they all wanted to buy a ticket. And that's what happened. There was this American company, because Red Star Line was founded here in the United States by the Philadelphia Railway Company. And so the founders of Red Star Line, on a certain moment, they were investing in railways and bringing the East Coast closer to the West Coast. What they did on a certain moment, they looked for a port in Antwerp. They wanted to bring oil to Antwerp and then bring immigrants back, labor forces, back to the United States, because there was a shortage of that in those days. So what happened was they picked the port of Antwerp. They never brought the oil, but they saw the gigantic mass of business in bringing people over. Everybody knows the movie Titanic,
right,
where you see Leonardo DiCaprio at the end playing his cards, and then he gets the ticket and go in a third class in steerage. Well, imagine that, because the ships of Red Star Line, especially the big one, the Belgenland, was even bigger and more luxurious than Titanic. So that was the whole story. There was an historical, social, economical story why people wanted to move over to the United States. Of the 12 million people that arrived at Ellis Island in New York, 2.6 came from Antwerp. So if you look, it's quite a big number. And then, of course, but we'll talk about that later, some very famous names as well.
Well, you can mention them now.
Well, of course, it's a story of Irving Berlin. He was on one of the Red Star Line ships when he left in 1893, being the son of a Jewish cantor, together with 7 other family members. Nobody knew Irving Berlin at the time. It wasn't his name, of course. It was Isaac Balin. But then afterwards, he became much more famous, and only 20 years later, in first class, the orchestras were already playing the music of Mr. Berlin. Then you have the grandparents of Neil Diamond on both sides. He was giving a concert in Antwerp, and I welcomed him at the City Hall, and it's a silly question. A silly story, because I asked him, Mr. Diamond, is Diamond your real name? I mean,
it's a good question.
The city of Antwerp, diamonds. So I asked, Mr. Diamond, is Diamond your real name? He looks at me and says, Philip, of course it is. What do you think? I said, no, it could be the name of your artist name or whatever, because of the diamonds. He said, no. I said, and how does your family, where does your family come from? Oh, from Central Europe, and we moved over to America. I said, you know when? And then he said, well, we have approximate dates. And I asked the names of his mother and father, and he gave me some names. while we were having the reception at the City Hall, the staff was going through, because we are linked to the Family Migration Center in New York and so many other archives as well. And we came with names. And when I said it to him, he said, okay, I want to see that now. So I left with him and some other security cards, and we left from the city of Antwerp, from the City Hall, and I took him to, at that moment the museum wasn't opened yet, and he really wanted to see it. So on both sides his family was there as well. Golda Meir, later Prime Minister of Israel, she was on the Red Star Line, and then many more.
Sam
Fox, former ambassador of the United States.
Albert Einstein.
Albert Einstein, the family.
I'm giving you names.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you've been there. You did the show. General Hickover, Admiral Hickover, who was the founder of the nuclear subs here in America. So yeah, Murray, who learned America to dance, the father of Fred Astaire.
Arthur Murray.
Arthur Murray,
yeah.
The father of Fred Astaire. So I always say, we all know this song, which we will sing in a couple of weeks. When it is Christmas, I'm dreaming of a white Christmas. Now you have to imagine, if Irving Berlin would not have got on that ship, nobody of us for the last 60, 70 years would have been singing that beautiful song,
That's
White
true.
Christmas.
That's totally true. So these are famous, high-profile people that we all know.
Mm-hmm.
Were there stories, like what were some of the stories that really moved you? Some of the stories are incredible. They're all incredible, actually.
I'm
right?
saying, I'm referring to names who became famous people.
Right.
But you have to take in account that 99.9% of the people on those ships were not famous at all, not at that day, not in those years. And there is a story of a Jewish family which really moved me when we found out about the family Morel. And so Father Morel, he was 19 years old. He'd been saving to take his wife and 4 children to come to America. And because he didn't have yet enough money, they planned that he would leave, and after 6-7 months he could send some more money back, and then the rest of the family, his wife and the 4 children, could follow him. That 6 months turned out to be 2 years. After 2 years, they had enough money, they got money from family, and they were ready to leave. So there's the mother with her 4 children, 3 boys and 1 daughter, ready to leave in Antwerp. You have to take in account that when people left the ships in Antwerp, and that's what you see when you come to the museum, you really take the same way, you take the same passage as all the immigrants. There was medical checks, there was paperwork to do. They say to her, I'm sorry, everybody can pass, but not the little daughter, not Ita Moel. She can't go. Now, I always say that you have to imagine what it is if you're standing there. That's a kind of a, I would refer to it Sophie's choice. I mean, or you say, I stay here with the whole family. Right. And then no, you will never have the opportunity to go back, because once you bought a ticket, it's not like today you go to the doctor, they prescribe something, and then you can say, oh, I cancel my flight and I'll take another one. If you bought a ticket, it was no refunding or anything.
Wow.
All the money was gone, which they saved for 4 years. Or you take the decision to say, I leave my little child behind, and I go with the 3 others and see my husband again, which I've been missing for more than 2 years, and then somebody of the family will send up afterwards our daughter. That's what they did. The daughter stayed in Antwerp for about 3 years. There was organizations that took care of children and homes where they could stay, etc., etc. They cured the problems which she had. And after 3 years, she was cleared to take a boat. The family was waiting for them in Ellis Island. She leaves Antwerp. She's cleared, you can go. She arrives in Ellis Island. And there's somebody at Ellis Island says, I'm sorry, you can't go in because you have glaucoma, which was an infection of the eyes.
Oh my gosh.
It was something that did not appear here in the United States. It was something that came from Central Europe. So she was refused. She did not have contact, nor with her brothers, the mother or the father. She went back with the Red Star Line ship, stayed another 4 years altogether she stayed 7 years in Antwerp.
Wow.
We have all the letters she wrote to another friend and really expressing sorrow, and on a certain moment really thinking like, this is never going to work, I'm never going to see my family again. And then for the third time she could make it, and yeah, that's what happened. Mr. Moel today is 92 years old. He's a very successful businessman, and it's only when our staff went over them with documents that he really, because he's a brother, he's not a father, he's the oldest brother, the parents are gone, but the oldest brother is 92 now. It's only with all the documents that we gave him that he came out and found out about the truth of what happened, because the parents in those days never really explained what happened.
Wow.
I don't know what you say, I left the youngest sister behind, and so it's quite an emotional story, and that's what Red Star Line is about.
Yeah.
It's a story of you and me. We are all linked to somebody we know. There's, I mean, 2.6 million people in that period means that today about 44 million Americans are connected with somebody who was on the ships of the Red Star Line.
Right. It's amazing. It's such a heart-wrenching story, and there were so many like that. You know, we came to the museum. I came with a little boy, one of my best friends who lives in Belgium, and her 2 children. And truthfully, all 3 kids are not museum people. They didn't want to go. They didn't want to go to a museum. We spent 6 hours there, and they didn't want to leave. That's how wonderful and rich that
we bring it in a
is.
very contemporary way. This is not a museum where be quiet, you only see, don't touch and things like that. It has to be something to feel. So there's a lot of audio, there's a lot of movies. You really need to understand. We show you by never shown footage before what it must have been living in the end of the 19th century in Russia of Tsar Nicholas. We show you what it was, the pogroms. We show what it was when there's international crisis. We face a crisis and social difficult times today and economical times to the financial times today, but I can tell you 120 years ago it was much, much, much worse. And people always want something for the best, and that's what I think is so important. I remember that I gave the quote at the opening of in my speech at the opening of the museum, referring to the first inhabitants of Manhattan, the Algonquin Indians. And they have a saying that the most important thing for the bears, which they were hunting for in those days, was to make sure that the youngest one have the opportunity to continue. So making sure life goes on, making sure that the next generation has the opportunity of moving forward. That's the only thing that all those millions of people had in common. One dream, the dream to have a better life. And I think that's what makes the museum. Yes, I hear it the whole time when people come in, go out with the music, the soundscapes, the video, the footage, the testimonies of all these people. It's not a story of Titanic where glamour, first class, it all ended well. No, there are very, very, very sad stories. There's also the story that approximately 10% of the people that left somehow had to come back because at the end they didn't find the jobs, they didn't find the opportunities they believed in. So yeah, if you come to Antwerp or if you visit Europe, it's definitely worth to come over and have a look in the museum.
It was remarkable. Everything down to the part of the museum where you can look through it like a little peephole, as if you're one of the third-class steerage passengers, and look through. Weren't you only allowed up on the main deck if you were a steerage passenger for like 3 hours a day or something?
3 hours or 4 hours a day, yeah. And the rest you stayed down.
So you got to peek through and see what the other passengers
And imagine
were
when
doing.
it was bad weather. The voyage took about 7 to 9 days. In the beginning it was about 9 days. You had 4 hours you could come out on the deck, and the other time you were down there.
With lots of people.
With lots of people, packed. For many people that was even better than where they came from. But nevertheless packed. And then, you know, when you start, I always say, think of taking a plane in economy, and instead of a flight of 5 or 6 hours, we're all going to stay there for 11 days.
Oh, gosh.
Okay? And you know the 2 toilets, okay, in the cabin?
Yeah.
So you know what might happen with those 2 toilets if we would all stay in the cabin for 11 days. I just want to give you the...
Yeah, no.
But
that's it's not
more
appealing to me.
No, and that's what happened. So now and then they had to move the people on the deck, and then they come to really clean put the mattresses out there, etc., and then get everybody back down. And but at the end, it was new life.
Right.
If you see in the document that the father of Irving Berlin wrote down, he said, after all these things, after everything we experienced, that was so important. And Irving Berlin became famous, and more than 100 years, I'm still very close with his family. The family that lives in France and lives in New York, his eldest daughter still lives in New York. We're very proud that they donated the piano of Mr. Berlin to the museum. So yeah, we need to tell this story.
These stories are so incredible to me because, like you said, transforming the old story into the new story must have been so, you know, for people to be able to go through so much hardship. My grandfather traveled for almost a year by foot with his mom and 2 sisters just to get to Antwerp, to hope to get to the new country. And, you know, the vision of what could be had to be so much bigger than all of the difficulties of the hardships that they had to withstand to get through there, to get to the new country.
It was a voyage of hope.
Yeah.
That's what I call it. It was a voyage of hope. We only had trains as of 1903 to Antwerp in the big station. So the whole period before, people came on horses or by walking, and some really needed a long time, 6 months, even longer, up to 9 months. Sometimes they didn't have enough money, so they stayed in town for a couple of years to find the money to finally buy a ticket. Now, the thing of Red Star Line was they sold tickets all over. There's one more other story which I find amazing, and we came out during research. Red Star Line tickets were sold all over. And they had this idea that the vicar, the lawyer, the doctor, the baker, everybody could sell tickets of Red Star Line and gain a little money. So they had many agents spread all over to sell you the tickets. We came out that a very famous place where people bought tickets is a place the whole world now knows because of a very dark side in the history of mankind, which is Auschwitz. It wasn't called Auschwitz then, it was Oswiecim, the village in Poland in between 1920 to 1927. That was a place connecting several countries with a major railway connection where people go to buy a ticket for a new life. Now, can you imagine that only 10 years later, that's where the Nazis starting to kill people, gassing them in the gas chambers. So that same place where people went to get a ticket for a new life in the United States became afterwards a place where people arrived when they were sent into the gas chambers. We would never have expected that Red Star Line would give us that information. Yeah. Neither would we expect that what we are commemorating in Europe these days, the beginning of the Great War, the First World War, 1914, 1918, that when the United States got involved in the First World War in 1917, the ships of Red Star Line were the ships that brought troops from the United States to Europe to come and fight here and try to liberate us from the German Empire. So the story of Red Star Line is a story, of course, of migrations, people on the move, but it is so connected between our 2 countries that this was, in my opinion, the most important thing I did in my political career. And it never gives, there are not that many politicians, if I may say so, that have a dream, have the opportunity to create it, be present there when the king and the queen and all the others are there, and then afterwards still look at it back and see that everybody agrees with it. So I feel very proud and honored to be able to have done that project.
It is the most extraordinary museum. I promised myself I wouldn't cry during our interview. It's very emotional for me to be there and to see from the Museum of Modern Art to Red Star Line Museum, the stars, the red stars that are painted on the sidewalk. And one of them is my grandfather.
Absolutely.
And what was it like for you on the opening day? What was your emotional experience?
Oh, I must say it was emotional, and there was two things. The day the museum opened was planned long in advance because a very dear friend of me, Diane van Furstenberg, the fashion designer who is from Belgium, she supported me, I must say, 9 or 10 years ago when I run marathons in New York to get everybody aware, and she said, Philip, you're never gonna arrive alive, but nevertheless, if you want me to throw in a party, I'll be happy to do so. She did. She supported me, and everybody was coming in, Diane, but then at the end they said, we had a new king. That year we had a new king, and they said, I wrote a letter to the royal family and to His Majesty, and I said, Your Majesty, if you come and visit Antwerp, we have a beautiful museum, why don't you come for your inaugural welcoming in the city on the day of the opening? And the King and the Queen accepted it. So beside the opening of Red Star Line in the museum, we also had the royal visit that night, and they're so nice people. We had a wonderful day. It was a wonderful evening. It was very emotional to stand there trying not to cry, as you told me, but I think it ran out well, and it's been going good, and almost every week there is many events, and I'm always happy to go in there and to see that people from all over the world are enjoying them.
So from creating this museum, what's the most important thing that you learned about yourself?
The most important thing is that even us today, we always think we find easy solutions. Sometimes when I watch TV and I see people debating, they come out with the most easiest solutions to very difficult problems. Problems that, in all honesty, we've never solved in the last, let's say, 5,000 years. And some people say, it's very easy. Migration, just do this. People on the move, just do that. Why don't you do this and it's all solved? Why don't you do that? If it would have been that easy, believe me, we're human beings. The difference between us and a plant, flowers, or animals is that we have some, as Hercule Poirot calls it, little grey cells. And although we have a lot of those, there are still challenges where the only thing we can do is make out the best. And so looking and reading about all these stories gave me an idea how strong people can be, how strong family can be, what it must be for every mother and father to make sure that they give the best of themselves for their children. I think that's what's worth it. And I said that night, referring to a song of John Lennon, a dream you dream alone is only a dream, but a dream you dream together becomes reality. I think that's exactly what the Red Star Line is about.
Thank you so much for being here.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here in beautiful Sarasota. And I'm happy to come back.
So thrilled to have you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for joining us
On the red couch.